No one.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Gators Online Show. I am Keith Niebuhr. That is Zach Almaverdi. We're going to break down UF's coaching. I can't even talk, Zach. We're going to break down the coaching search today. We're also going to preview the Florida-Kentucky game, and we're going to bring in Nick Roush of KSR, which covers the Kentucky Wildcats for the On3 Network, to give us kind of the skinny on Mark Stoops' team. And there's a lot of – listen.
Yeah.
There are a lot of eyes on the Florida program, and up in Kentucky, there are a lot of eyes on that program too, because they want to know what the future is for Mark Stoops. Even though basketball season just started, they're still talking some football because Mark Stoops just hadn't been getting it done the last couple of years. But obviously, we want to get rolling, Zach, with the UF coaching search. That's what's on. That's what's on everybody's mind right now. So we're in week 3. Billy Napier was fired on October 19th after going 22-23. And Zach, it doesn't seem like there's been a lot of news, but what do you expect? It's all these other candidates or potential candidates are still coaching other teams. Florida fired Billy Napier, halfway into the season, and so there's a long time to go. So we knew there was going to be a lot of kind of, I don't want to say dead air. There's a lot of chatter behind the scenes, but how much of is it accurate? How much of it is coming from agents, from the coaches themselves, all that stuff, but as you see it today, Zach, I think we both agree who the number one candidate is and sort of the ball's in his court. But what's your takeaway right now?
Well, first of all, you mentioned the chatter, Keith. You've been doing a great job at the Gators Online message board of providing some daily chatter on just what's going out there in the coaching industry with all the searches happening. If you haven't been keeping up with Keith's updates, make sure that you're, stay tuned to Swamp Talk, where we have that pretty active message board this time of year, especially with the search happening. So you're right. I mean, I think it's no secret or surprise where this search starts for Florida. It was interesting to see the betting odds that had came out the last couple weeks. Initially, Lane Kiffin was the favorite. Then for the last 2 updates, it had been Eli Drinkwitz. But then on Wednesday, officially Lane Kiffin took back the top spot. He is now the odds-on favorite to be Florida's next coach. And look, you're right, Keith. We're in the middle of the season. There's a lot of games still being played. There's a lot of potential candidates for Florida that have their season still going. But at this point in the search, there has been so much talk about Florida and Kiffin. There's been so much discussion. There's been so many stories written. There's been so many videos and podcasts and TV shows that have discussed this. It's out there. And you've not seen Lane come out at any point and shoot down these rumors, say that he's not going to Florida, say that he's staying Ole Miss, and he certainly still has not signed an extension. Now, that could happen still, and maybe he's just waiting until the end of the regular season, but my gut tells me is that he is going to let this year play out and decide on what he wants to do next, but he's still obviously leaving that door open to consider his options because he hasn't signed an extension, and he hasn't come out as some other coaches have done in recent years when their names get tied to potential openings and say, hey, I'm not a candidate for this job. So I think that speaks volumes in my opinion.
Well, right now it's a unique situation because his team is, I think, 8-1. They're very much in the picture to make the college football playoff. In fact, if the season ended today, they'd be a high seed. They've done a hell of a job this year. Only loss was a game that they led by 9 going into the fourth quarter at Georgia. So hats off to the players at Ole Miss, the coaching staff at Ole Miss, and Lane Kiffin. And so you've got that, and then you've got this situation where, again, he has always said, I don't talk about this stuff during the season. However, if you knew 100% that you were staying, why would you put a fan base through something like this? And that's not to say he's leaving, by the way. I'm just asking that question. Why would you do that? And maybe it's to drive your own market value up. Maybe he truly doesn't know, or maybe he's just said, listen, again, like I said, I'm not going to say anything during the season, no matter what. Of course, the problem is when you don't do that, people speculate and all that, and whatever. I mean, I'm not sure what he's going to do, but what we can tell you, Zach, is that there is some level of, we'll call it cautious optimism on the Florida side from what we've been told by various sources. But there's also been some optimism on the Ole Miss side. Now, I will say this, Zach. I think when Billy Napier was fired those first few days, there weren't many people in that Ole Miss bubble that thought, okay, this guy's leaving. And in the last couple of weeks, I think they've come to grips with the fact that at least there's a potential for it to happen. Now, we've got our great reporters on our site. There are other sites that cover Ole Miss well too, and there's varying takes on the situation out there. But look, what we know is he's clearly considering this deal. He's Lane Kiffin's clearly considering. He's weighing his options, but he's focused on the season, and that's okay. That's his right. But again, I guess the question that keeps coming back to everybody's minds is, if you knew for sure you weren't going to do it, why not just put it out there and end it right there? And so I think that's where, so much of the speculation comes from that. Look on our message board, Zach. It's okay. He hadn't said anything yet. Why? And that's the first thing that comes to people's mind. But look, they're doing a great job out there. And Lane Kiffin's got to do it his way, right? He's got to do it his way. And if he feels like this is the best way to continue to coach his team and handle this situation, that's fine. But you just leave yourself open to, so many more rumors that you could easily just shut down. So we'll see. I mean, I'm sort of leaning, Zach, I don't know where you're at. I'm sort of leaning right now that I think he ends up at Florida. But again, I'm not predicting it. I don't feel that confident. He may feel something one day and change his mind the next. And what we're seeing in a lot of the reporting is this, right? A lot of the ups and downs. And we're still not going to know for several weeks. So, it really remains to be seen what he's going to do. But he's clearly the number one candidate. We both think that he would fit perfectly at Florida. But, Ole Miss thinks he's a perfect fit out there too. And just as Florida has reasons for optimism, I think they have some reasons for optimism too. He seems to be comfortable there. He seems to like working there.
I just my read, and this is just my read. This is just my opinion. I feel like the amount of time and investment that he's put into Oxford. I mean, he spent 6 years at that place. I definitely don't think that he's necessarily maxed out there, but I do think that he's put in a lot of time and investment. And while that may be reason to stay, it also I feel like he's put in enough work to feel like if he does leave, he's not leaving him hanging, and that if he closes this chapter and decides to start a new one, that he can feel good about it. And I do think that there is something to be said about the potential for him wanting a new change, wanting a new challenge. Yes, he's got the comfort of Oxford, and he's could be a god or a legend there. And that's great, but he could come to Florida and be that. And he could also that might not be something that he wants, and as a matter of fact, he had that special that he came out with this year, Keith, where he said, I used to want a statue, and I used to want all these things as a coach, and now he just wants to be able to impact players the way that his dad did. Like the things that matter to him don't they've changed. So, but I think that there's something to be said about being at a place for a while and wanting to get a fresh start, wanting to try something new, wanting a different challenge. And I do think that you have to do it for the right opportunity and for the right reasons. And I just think that Florida is one of the jobs that can pull him away from Ole Miss. I don't know how many could, but I think that Florida is one of them. And there's just a lot of things that make sense about this move for him. And I just think that when it comes down to it, it's going to be about what he wants and what, if he really feels like Ole Miss is where he needs to be, or if it's time for something new. I lean more towards the latter.
Yeah, the thing is, I hope people respect his opinion or his decision, whatever it is. If he's truly comfortable there, truly happy there, then and he feels like that's where he belongs, then that's where he belongs. His opinion of his life is more important than our opinions of his life.
Correct.
I see all these people out there, all these pundits. The thing you and I have never said, and I hope the guys in Ole Miss aren't doing this either, and is that he should do this or he should do that. And I'm seeing a lot of national people say that. Well, he should stay, or he should go to this school,
or he should go to LSU.
He should do.
I definitely don't think he should go to LSU. I'll say that. He
should do. Yeah, exactly. He should do whatever the hell he wants to do. It's Correct. His life. It's not our life. The other thing, though, is, this is a tricky situation for Florida. Obviously, they've got to wait it out, but so does Ole Miss. So, signing day is just a month away, right? You've got the playoffs and all that stuff. But if he decides to leave, then and it's after the playoffs are started, let's say it's January 5th, let's say. Well, then Ole Miss may have missed out on some coaching candidates like, John Summerall, Tulane. And so it's really a tricky situation on both sides. There's no perfect answer to this. the early enrollment of college football players, the transfer portal rules now help a guy when they leave, but this early enrollment thing really hurts both programs because both of these schools have to tell recruits something, right? Florida and Ole Miss, the guys that are getting ready to sign December 3rd. And one of these schools is going to be accused of being full of BS when it's all said and done, even though they may not have been. You know what I mean? Like somebody's either going to leave or stay. And if he stays, then UF's going to have another, you know what I mean? So there's all these things going on at once. Like recruits right now probably are reading the same reports that a lot of the fans are reading and saying, okay, well, I think Florida may get Lane Kiffin, and this is a guy I want to play for. And then if they don't get him, now what do I do? So it's not ideal for either school, but you're right. I think Lane Kiffin has done such a great job at Ole Miss that if he did decide to leave, that they're now in position to go out and get
absolutely
a really strong candidate, maybe the defensive coordinator, it may be somebody else out there. Maybe they want to take a run at a Brian Hartline or something like that. Ole Miss is a great school, great program, great community. It's a good place. They're going to be fine if he leaves. Now, granted, people say, well, what are you talking about? They haven't won an SEC title since the early 1960s. That's true, but Lane has really elevated that program. Now, it's going to be, the test is, can they sustain it if he left, obviously. But it's also a test if he's there, because that's college football these days. It's very hard to stay on top for very long. And the one thing we know about coaches, Zach, is most great coaches are always kind of looking for that next challenge. I mean, we always think about it. What do you do when your coach gets fired? What do you do when your coach gets fired? Well, Urban Meyer wasn't fired. He just up and left. Steve Spurrier wasn't fired. He just up and left. So their change is sort of inevitable in coaching. It hurts for a little bit if you're the team that loses a guy, and then you get over it and you move on to the next guy. But these coaches, these alpha coaches, almost always, it seems like, now there's certain guys that stay at certain programs forever and ever and ever. But a lot of guys are looking for that next challenge. Just kind of the way it goes. I mean, like Zach, you and I had friends who had parents. Some of their parents wanted to move all over the country every 5 years. Some of them found a town that they want to stay in forever. Everybody's different, right?
Yeah. I do think that he either leaves for Florida or stays at Ole Miss. I don't see him going to another program, including LSU. Maybe before all this drama in Baton Rouge started playing out, that wasn't the case. But I just cannot see Lane leaving the situation that he has at Ole Miss to go into that mess in the state of Louisiana with all the politics involved. Like, at least in Florida, he's inheriting a good roster and none of that stuff.
Well, and also LSU's a rival school of Ole Miss too. That would kind of be, it's probably one of Ole Miss's two biggest rivals, and it would be a real slap in the face, let's say, to Ole Miss. I don't think he wants to do that. I've talked to the guy once in my life, so I can't act like I'm friends with Lane Kiffin, but he seems like a guy that truly cares about Ole Miss. You know what I mean? Ole Miss sort of resuscitated his career.
100%.
You know what I mean? I mean, he had done some great things at FAU, don't get me wrong, 2 10-win seasons out of 3 years, but Ole Miss got him back, and obviously he respects them for doing that. And so, I'm sure he's got some loyalty, some feelings of real loyalty to that school, and who could blame him,
Well, and look, they've had a lot of success under his tenure, and it's been pretty impressive to see what he's been able to accomplish. And look, he's finishing out this season with no losses from getting into the college football playoff. And who knows, Keith, maybe it's going to take the Gators somehow getting an upset in Oxford to bring Lane to Gainesville a little bit earlier. And you know what they say, man, if you can't beat them, join them, right?
Well, the other side of that is his team's won a lot of close games this year. So either they're living on a prayer, or, man, sometimes we saw it last year with that Gator basketball team, Zach. Sometimes there's just magic in the air with a certain group of kids. All right, we're going to get back to the coaching search in a few minutes. We're getting ready to bring on Nick Roush of KSR. But before we do that, we've got to do a quick ad read. So take it away, Mr. Zach.
Absolutely. Before we bring in Nick, we want to give a shout out, as we do each and every episode, to Game Time. College football season is in full swings, and there's nothing better than being in the stands at the tailgate and sharing those experiences with friends and family. But as you guys know, it can be difficult at times to get your hands on tickets. Well, the Game Time app gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing tickets and experiences in just a few taps. It's incredibly easy to use, and the Game Time guarantee means that you can trust you'll get 100% authentic tickets on time and at the best price. Plus, Fees are always included, so what you see is what you pay. There are no surprise fees at checkout, and I can attest to that. I've bought tickets through this app multiple times this season, and what they showed in that stadium map is what you pay when you get to checkout, and you can get college football tickets for as low as $25. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use the redeem code ON3. That's spelled ON3 for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket. Go download the Game Time app today.
All right, Zach, you know when that Game Time app is going to be needed by Gator fans? There's a couple basketball games against the Kentucky Wildcats.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so we transition to Kentucky football. We got Nick Roush. Whoops, sorry about that, Nick. Nick Roush of KSR on three's great Kentucky site. I think they lead our network in traffic like every month, and it's all 100% because of Nick. There's no question about that.
There's no doubt.
And Nick, thanks for coming on, man. We appreciate it. Were you ready to talk some Florida Kentucky football here, or what, man?
It feels weird because I don't know, like Kentucky fans, we're haunted by this Florida Gator football team, but now you're almost in a you gotta beat them standpoint, but it's weird. It's a very weird spot for both.
Or do you
programs.
want Florida to win so a coaching change happens?
Yeah, there's certainly some people who are thinking that, right? And there's the other hand where it's like, well, I will never not enjoy watching Kentucky beat Florida. There's that part of it too. And then there's the other part of, man, will it save Stoops' job? I don't know if it will, in fact, save it if he beats an interim coach. I don't know if that's exactly one of those, hey, you did good enough. You beat Billy Gonzalez's Florida Gators, right? But at the same time, if you lose this game, that just gives you another reason to move on from Mark Stoops. So it's a weird time. It's a weird place. But most importantly, it's the last SEC home game of the season. And guys, do you know the last time Kentucky won an SEC home football game?
I don't.
Zach, you were there. It was September of 2023. Right, Ray Davis had 285 rushing yards, and I want to say 3 touchdowns. Kentucky's lost 10 straight SEC home games, and that is just a big, ugly, nasty streak. And
Sure.
They've beat 2 of them in a row. They hadn't scored 2 touchdowns against an SEC foe in forever. They did that a couple weeks ago against Tennessee. They snapped their SEC losing streak last week. Now this is a big, ugly monkey that they got to get off the program's back in order to move forward after a pretty rough couple of years, to say the least.
The big irony would be all the years where you needed and prayed that Kentucky would beat Florida and didn't. Now you've got that certain segment that kind of, like you said, may want them to lose to get rid of Mark Stoops, and now they might win the game when when you're actually it's crazy. Nick, one interesting thing, and we're going to get into the game here shortly, but when Florida had that 30-plus win streak, 30 years, one of the interesting things, and I think people forget, was that the majority of those wins came after the SEC moved the series, and you guys are young guys, but the SEC moved that series from its traditional spot in mid-late November to September. So Kentucky lost out on both ends of that because they got the early September heat of the swamp that they used to never have to deal with. And in return, they lost the 38-degree cold, sleet, all that stuff on the back end of the schedule at Florida at home. And Florida went on that unbelievable, painful winning streak for Kentucky fans. So now we're back in November, and I looked it up. Zach, how about this? Nick, correct me if I'm wrong. They're expecting possible snow flurries in Kentucky, but not till Monday. Florida's going to miss it by about 2 days. Okay, Zach? So temperature's probably around 50. That's still cold for these Florida boys, Nick. But it is interesting how that worked out. But what's the mindset of this Kentucky team right now? They just went down to Auburn. They got Hugh Freeze canned. They held Auburn to 3 points. Okay, so Auburn's offense, stinks. But that was a pretty solid defensive, game there for them. So Kentucky's now 3-5 overall, 1-5 in the SEC. What's the mindset going into this one? Are they upbeat, or did that game change the whole attitude of the team, or what?
to your earlier point, 1990 was the last time Florida played in Lexington in November. So
There you go.
I think some people are excited for a little cold weather. And I do think this Kentucky team is excited. There was week after week, Stoops was saying, this team's getting better. They haven't quit yet. And, you don't like hearing that the team's getting better when they keep on losing. But it was it was something that was said a lot in the preseason. We got to coach this team to be able to overcome adversity, to not let go of the rope. That's really what happened last year. They played close for a while, and then it sort of just snowballed on them the second half of the season. And it really showed evidence. It was proof that what Stoops was saying was true, that they were getting better, that this team had no quit. And David Gusta, the talented nose tackle for Kentucky, he said, I'm proud of my guys for not quitting, but practice is sure a lot more fun this week after that win. So I do think they are reinvigorated, and that kind of like, it feels like, from just if you're one of those who likes to bet on spots, it does feel like the right spot for Kentucky, where all right, you finally got you were seeing some good things, but now you finally got the win that gives you an extra sense of belief. And then on the other side, Florida, they laid it out on the line last week. Probably should have won that football game. How much is left in the tank? They're not very healthy. If Kentucky gets out and jumps them early, hits them in the mouth, them Florida boys, they'll be putting on their overcoats. They'll start standing next to those heaters, right? Like you can really see a scenario where Kentucky builds off that momentum from the win at Auburn.
Interesting.
Now, what are your thoughts on the pressure that's facing Mark? Obviously, there's a lot of discussion. How's he handle it? How much of a hot seat do you feel like he's truly under heading into this one?
Yeah, it's one of those. For a while he didn't really acknowledge it, and then Kentucky played about as well as they could have against Texas, had every chance to win it, and then they let go of the rope. They had bad special teams plays. I think they outgained Texas like 2-1 and just gave up 2 punt returns, and then can't punch it in on goal to go in overtime, lose to Texas. That was the first time he really acknowledged all of the heat, all of the pressure that was mounting on the program. So he's certainly aware of it. And yeah. I think last week, nobody's naive enough to say that you beat a coach who was fired the next day, so you're off the hot seat. But like I said previously, like it gave him okay, we're doing the right thing. We're going to keep doing the right thing, and that will lead to better results. That might work this week. I don't know if it will work well enough to get back to the postseason. They would need to win 3 of their last 4, and this one appears to be the easiest on their plate. They go to Vandy and go to Louisville to end the season, both top 25 teams right now. There's an FCS team sprinkled in there as well, but you gotta beat Florida and then one of those last 2 to be able to get there. And even then, it might be a little too far gone. That's where we don't know, and that's honestly what makes November so much fun, because like there is so much uncertainty right now with Mark Stoops' job situation. Like he could win out and leave, he could win out and get fired. Like everything is kind of on.
There could be another school that comes and hires him.
You're right, exactly. Like I think Mitch Barnhart might want that to happen, to pull the old John Calipari, right? Like, but on the other hand, too, that could have just been a 1-game blip at Auburn. They could have very well just played the perfect team without any offense to where they could score 10 points and win. This is a game that feels kind of similar in a way, especially with all of the Florida injuries at wide receiver, because the one thing that the one part that I've just struggled with all year with this Kentucky, their defensive front is really good, but some teams have just ran by the secondary. It's like, Florida, Trey Wilson, like Vernell Brown, we saw Dallas Wilson against Texas. Like he was awesome. And then you look up and maybe none of those guys are playing Saturday. So.
Sure. Let me ask you real quick to follow up what I just said. Has the crowd at Kroger Field chanted for Mark to be fired at any point this season?
We've not gotten that far. Now, there were some John Summerall chants last year. There was a guy wearing a Fire Stoops shirt at the Tennessee game. Those stands were completely empty. It was only orange at the end. And I think ultimately that's been the biggest indictment, and that's why I'm
Listen,
curious to see.
SEC fans are 3 for 3 this year in chanting for their coach to be fired in the home stadium, and it happening the next day. So
it could happen again, and especially if they go out and lose to a Florida team with an interim head coach, because a lot of people are still chomping at the bit. They were happy that Kentucky won on the Plains. It was only the second time since the '60s that that's happened, but it still is just, you're left wanting more. They've been leaving that stadium with losses to SEC teams for 2 years straight now. They need to feel good leaving the stadium after an SEC win, and if they don't, then you probably will hear some of those Saturday night at Kroger Field.
Nick, we knew the minute Billy Napier was fired, and even before he was fired, quite frankly, who the number one target for Florida would be. Everybody knew it was going to be Lane Kiffin.
Yeah.
Who's Kentucky's number one target if they decide to make a move, or top 2 or 3 guys? Do they know, or is it one of those ones like Penn State where it's all over the map?
Oh no, it's John Summerall or bust. Which I think there's some folks at Auburn who feel similarly. It's not quite as obvious, or even if it is obvious, the people at Auburn will kind of throw some other stuff around. But John Summerall, he played for Rich Brooks, right? He came back and coached with Mark Stoops. When he got hired at Troy, it was after a 9-win season, and he actually came back and coached in the bowl game where they beat Iowa in the Citrus Bowl to get their second 10-win season. Since then, I mean, he crushed it at Troy, won 2 Sun Belts, and then was in the American Championship game a year ago. John Summerall is beloved up here because a lot of it's just the way, like his public persona. He is a very he's that raspy voice linebacker who's a great motivator, a great recruiter, got a lot of good ball players here, a great talent developer. And since he's been away from UK and been a head coach, he's also done a pretty good job of hiring offense coordinators. So there's a real FOMO with Summerall where you feel like, at least for a lot of Kentucky fans, most times when you fire a coach, there isn't an obvious choice, right? Like Kentucky is not the program that gets to pick their guy that can get this sort of ascending coach in the coaching ranks. Like when they hired Mark Stoops, it was Butch Jones or Sonny Dykes. Sonny Dykes did not do well at Cal. He had to kind of flame out there and then rediscover his footing in Texas before getting to the national championship at TCU. We all know how Butch Jones, the champion of life, ended up. I mean, he's at Central Arkansas now. This would be the chance where you can actually get a guy on the way up who might choose you over others, and that just doesn't happen. So that's why there's a real we can't let this guy get away, and you fear he might get away to Auburn because he's a Huntsville native, he's recruited that area well, and Auburn's a place where you can win a title if everything's going right. So there's a lot of nerves going around. People want this to happen. They're worried that since Stoops, like when he was flirting with A&M, when he didn't leave, Summerall was going to be the guy then. If Stoops got fired last year, Summerall was going to be the guy. Well, now you might actually fire Stoops and you might not be able to get Summerall. So there's a lot of anxiety right now in that situation. But at least if they don't get him, there's at least a decent backup candidate. And that would be Oregon offense coordinator Will Stein, who he's from Louisville. His dad played at Kentucky. He's been an outstanding play caller. He was good at UTSA, climbed up the ranks, and has been awesome in Oregon. And, now people want to hire proven power conference coaches. They're not necessarily eager to take a chance on a coordinator who has to learn on the job. Well, it might help Kentucky kind of get a stake at that claim, whereas some other schools might not be as interested, at least at the SEC or Big Ten level. So that would be your second choice. And outside of that, it's who the hell knows, because it's going to be a wild, wild, wild coaching carousel.
Gun to your head, do you think Summerall would pick Kentucky over Auburn?
I think there's a better chance than some would expect. Like for a lot of people, it's open and shut case. But Kentucky's greatest strength, like its biggest pitch to Summerall, could also be Auburn's biggest negative, and that's the alignment, right? That's the big word that people like to throw out. Jabba, right? Things get a little crazy at Auburn between boosters and administrators and all that. Whereas at Kentucky, you've had an AD that's been there forever. Summerall knows this state. He knows what works well. He knows how to make sure they're financially backed, and not just with local guys. Like he has decent relationship with all the right people. He would have full support of the alumni base, and it would be sort of like Rupp Arena selling out for Mark Pope's introductory press conference if he came back. Whereas he would not have the universal 100% approval rating that he might at Auburn. So I think Kentucky would have a shot, and part of that is because of just the universal support he would get here, whereas I don't know if that's necessarily the case at Auburn.
Okay. Nick, about this current Kentucky team, 14th in the SEC in offense, 13th in the SEC in defense. Some decent young talent, though, and it all kind of starts with this quarterback whose name I cannot pronounce. What is this guy the future of this team? He's from the state of Kentucky, correct?
Yep. He's a local kid. Yeah. Cutter Boley. It was one of those, Keith, where they didn't want to play him right away. That's why they brought in Zach Calzada. And part of it is last year was a disaster. They're down at Texas. They say, you know what, let's give this kid a shot. And he plays well. It's 10 of 16 for $160. Doesn't get in the end zone, but he makes some big time throws. After the game, McConaughey, dapped him up and told him, like, you got a bright future, kid. And so people got excited. They started him against Louisville, and it was just a disaster, an absolute disaster. So Kentucky had to hedge their bets. They weren't ready to go all in on Boley just yet. And then Calzada gets hurts his shoulder in his throwing arm. But really, it started in the fall camp. He was there's always one or two players at fall camp that everybody's talking about. Well, it was the backup quarterback who got all the buzz, and it made him realize, like, all right, this kid can play. We got to give him some live reps. And after a couple of games, it's like, let's do the damn thing. And it took some time for them to figure it out. His first SEC start was on the road at Williams-Brice Stadium, which is not an easy place to play. He had back-to-back plays that were defensive touchdowns. One was a strip sack that got scooped and scored. The next was a tip pass, pick six. And it was like, oh, God, this might be bad. But ever since that, he had steadily improved every single game. He had 5 touchdown passes against Tennessee. That was a UK freshman record. He had the completion percentage record against Texas, because they went to sort of a kind of air raidy type deal. Like, we're gonna make things simple for him. So quick reads, short passes that'll kind of be like an extension of the run game, and then we'll try to pick and choose our spots to be explosive. So, and he showed quite a bit of athleticism as a runner too, some escapability, and not just like, I'm going to get away and run 11 yards to make sure I get the first down and then get out of bounds, but also to keep his head downfield and then connect with his receivers. So it's one of those where he still has to show more, but he has been much better than expected. Where, I mean, guys, there was a time where it was like, okay, Mark Stoops is on the hot seat. Can anything save him? Oh, yeah, just this redshirt freshman. He has to do everything for him. And you know what? He kind of has to a certain extent. He's been much, much better than expected and has certainly a bright future in college football.
Nick, what are your thoughts on Saturday's game and just some keys that you'll be looking for? What is it going to take for Kentucky to get a win? How could they blow this thing as well?
The biggest thing is explosive plays, and I know Florida in the metrics they aren't good, but it does feel like whenever I'm flipping through, returning on a game, you see the highlights, it's like, okay, there goes another guy with an explosive play. Last year's game, perfect example. Lagway only completed 7 passes, but they were for 259 yards. Every time he dropped back to pass, it was either incompletion or a 50-yard bomb, right? And that's kind of what you can get with this defense. They have to limit the explosive plays. I think they've been really good against the traditional run game. They bottled up Auburn well a week ago in the run game, and that's certainly going to be a tall task against Jaden Baugh. Stoops and Brad White have said he's the most complete back that they'll face all year. But for me, it's a lot of, does DJ Lagway get those aggravating plays that keep drives alive, and then all of a sudden, whoopsie daisy, here goes Kentucky doing something stupid, and it's a Florida touchdown. So this is one of those that needs to be a low-scoring game. And I think the biggest key to offensive success for the Cats is making sure that Seth McGowan and the running backs are involved, because McGowan was awesome at the start of the season. He got dinged up against Texas. They couldn't get the run game going against Auburn. And the biggest part of the equation, too, has been the passing game with the running backs. They have back-to-back games where running backs were leaders in receptions, and that got completely taken away against Auburn. They get the running backs involved and are able to lean on them. If it's a 13-7 game, they will happily just turn around and hand the ball off, milk the clock, and try to get out of there in a 2.5-hour game. So I think that's where Kentucky wants to win, a low-scoring slobber knocker. That's what Stoops does best, is win ugly and win behind those running backs.
You want to give us a prediction? What do you got?
Part of me, I'm very conflicted in this game because part of me says, like, this is a pretty good matchup. Stoops gets his guys up for Florida. I think it's a bad spot for him. But Kentucky has struggled to string together good games, winning games. This is usually you see them play well and they come back and stub their toe. So I think it's ultimately going to be one of those that comes down to the wire. And I fear that it'll be a late Florida field goal and a 16-13 type deal, and the Gators escape Kroger Field, and you start hearing a lot of boo birds at Kroger Field as fans are leaving the stadium.
All right. Zach, you got anything else? We want to let Nick off the hook?
Another prediction for you, Nick.
Yep.
Who do you think Florida hires?
I've honestly always – Lane Kiffin says in interviews he always wanted to be Steve Spurrier, and now he gets the chance to go coach at Steve Spurrier Field in the same building that Steve Spurrier works. I know that people are saying, well, he doesn't have to go there to win and blah, 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 blah. And I know, there's LSU too, and there's all this other stuff. Dude, he's still tweeting about students showing up to games at Ole Miss. He doesn't want to do that, right? Ultimately, I think he's going to pull the trigger and end up in Gainesville. This feels like it's been a long time coming. It would have been a lot easier if the Gators and Scott Strickland didn't kick the can down the road a year ago. I fear that Mitch Barnhart might do something similar with Mark Stoops if he pulls off a win Saturday against Florida and they kick the can down the road for another year. But I've always thought that Lane was destined to end up being there, and I'm not going to change my mind now. I think the Lane train is going to Gainesville, and he'll be back in the Sunshine State, and Florida fans will be smiling ear to ear. But like you said right before I hopped on, the Gators could do themselves some favors by making sure that he's not in the college football playoff.
That's right.
Well, Nick, I think you're going to end up being the favorite Kentucky beat writer of the Gator fans.
Yes, he just took the top spot.
Yeah, I don't know who had it before you, but you're now number one. Whoever was number one's out. Nick Roush of KSR, man, great stuff. We appreciate you coming on by, and we look forward to that basketball series too. Now, this is exciting, man. It's fun to be able to talk basketball.
Yeah.
Zach and I are loving it. Zach's the beat writer. It's his beat, not mine. But we both love hoops, and we're excited to see what comes of this season.
Well, you won't catch me pandering once basketball gets into it gets into full swing. All right, we're coming for blood. Okay, we're coming for blood.
So let me ask you this, Nick. Before just real quick. National champions this century, Florida 3, Kentucky 1. Does that get under the skin? Do they even think about that, Kentucky fans? Are they not, or what is it just more about what our program is doing, not what somebody else is doing?
Yes, it's more about we haven't been to a Final Four in 10 years. We're mad about that sort of deal. And it's also a little different when, the Donovan had his 2 in back-to-back years, so it kind of feels like one, because it was just the run.
Wait a second. Wait a second. No, I got you.
Yeah, right. Like it just doesn't,
it's a while ago.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like kids these days, they weren't even alive when that was happening, which is wild to think out loud. But I do think there is some, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the pressure is going to be on Mark Pope to deliver soon, particularly when Pope does a lot of similar stuff to Golden as far as play style wise. And they got hot at the end of the year. They had the depth. Kentucky got them at Rupp, but they were the team that got hot late down the stretch. Pope needs to get hot and go on a deep run because Kentucky fans, they're starving for it. Fortunately, it feels like this is a team that can do it, although I worry a little bit about backcourt depth. They didn't have their point guard the first, through the few exhibitions in the first game of the season. And then they didn't have Denzel Aberdeen for some of that too. They at least got him playing point in the second half of the last game, and things started to work. But I really want Denzel Aberdeen to go off against Florida, though, because Todd Golden is clearly irritated about Denzel Aberdeen's departure. So it would be it would be nice to pour a little salt on that wound.
We better let him go. Zach,
he
before
had a tough
something really
spot.
incriminating here. Okay? Yeah. And Nick, you were 3 minutes ago the favorite Kentucky beat writer of Florida fans. You've now lost that title already. I got to tell you, Nick Roush, KSR, man. Again, thank you so much.
Let folks know where they can follow you, read your work, tweet at you to disagree or praise you.
Yes, please, at Roush KSR. That's Roush as in Roush Racing. No, I don't have one of those Mustangs, unfortunately. But KentuckySportsRadio.com. We're firing all cylinders over there. We got the YouTube channel. We got a little bit of everything. So I'm well known for maybe going a little nuclear in some of these post games, and that might be coming if Kentucky doesn't beat Florida on Saturday. So you'll want to be locked in.
All right, Nick. Thank you so much, man. We appreciate it. You take care. All right.
All right, guys. We'll see y'all.
Thank you, brother.
All right, Nick Roush of KSR. Man, Zach, he is high energy, man. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. If you like what we're doing, hit the like button and the subscribe button down below. Also, check out GatorsOnline.com. We got more to talk about, by the way, but go check out GatorsOnline.com. We got all kinds of specials to get your feet in the door right now. And we're covering this coaching search big time stuff every day. And back to that coaching search.
I do want to, I think we need to get out of here. I know we've talked about this before, but
yeah.
Where are you at on your number 2?
You can
only say one.
Yeah. I think Brom probably. But again, what we don't know is if Florida can't get Lane Kiffin, do they just say, okay, it's a decent group, but they're going to be pricey. It's a decent group, and because they might be pricey, does Florida then say, and I know everybody thinks that Scott Strickland's going to get somebody with head coaching experience, but does he do a shift? Does he change his mind? Does he get some information that says, you know what, maybe it's better to go get a coordinator and build around him, get a high-priced GM, get a high-priced OC, a high-priced DC, have more money for the staff. So there's a lot of unknown variables here. We just don't know. But my guess would be maybe Jeff Brom right now. What do you think, Zach?
My number 2 is Jedd Fisch. The more that I look into him, the more that I kind of look back on some of the, past that he's had in his career, places that he's worked, coaches that he's been with. I really think that he makes a lot of sense for Florida if they have to go a different direction. Because if you can't get Lane Kiffin, why does everybody want Lane? Because you just feel like he's the perfect fit for Florida. He's a perfect fit for this culture, this fan base, what the fans want from an offensive standpoint. He's going to talk trash. He gets it. Those are all things that you can say about Jedd Fisch. And I think the fact that who knows? Maybe he'd give a call to Howie Roseman, Keith, and have him come be his GM. I don't know if he can get him to leave the Eagles, but just the background that he has in the NFL, having worked with Sean McVay, having worked with Bill Belichick, the time that he spent in college with Jim Harbaugh, learning under Steve Spurrier, developing his offensive philosophy at Florida. I really like him as a candidate, and I really like some of the stuff that I've watched of him. I really think a personality fit is going to matter here, and I think that he checks that box.
How about this? Let's go one level further here, because we like to pull back the layers here. We're such deep thinkers. Zach, so I named Jeff Brom. Give me one reason why you think maybe Jeff Brom wouldn't be your number 2 guy. And I'll tell you maybe why Jedd Fisch might not be my number 2 guy.
I think that personality that I just said, I think, some of the stuff that I've heard about Brom, just his coaching style, his intensity, how he runs his program. And I don't mean any of this in a negative way, but I just, I don't necessarily know that that's the best direction for Florida to go. I'm not saying that it wouldn't work here. And we've certainly had coaches here that were very hard-nosed and ran their program that way, interacted with their team and staff that way. Will Muschamp comes to mind. But I feel like from an offensive standpoint and from a play calling standpoint, he would give the Gators what they want. But I just don't know, being on the stage at Florida and all the different, rooms that you got to walk in and hands that you got to shake. I feel like Louisville is probably, I think he's going to stay put at Louisville personally, but we'll see.
All right. So my kind of devil's advocate take on Jedd Fisch, but we better both hope one of these guys doesn't get the job, because they may play this tape. But I'm not dealing with that. Zach Alberverdi's not interviewing me. Screw that guy. With Jedd Fisch, and again, I don't dislike the resume. I mean, there's a lot to like. But I asked the question, if he wasn't a Florida alum, would his name even be coming up? And I don't know that it would, because he's been at so many places, because he doesn't have real ties to the Southeast in terms of work. He worked at Miami briefly, University of Miami, but hasn't worked in the SEC. So for me, it's more like, okay, are we only putting him, and you have a lot of things you like about him. So this is not demeaning. I'm not demeaning your take at all, Zach, or Jedd Fisch. But if he didn't have this connection to Florida, if he hadn't been a University of Florida graduate, I don't know that he would be on the list of the top candidates. Again, I could be totally wrong. That's just my opinion. I think both these guys are winners. I think they've both shown they can build programs. Now, I would give Braum a little bit of edge there, only in the sense that he hasn't just built programs, he's sustained them. Jedd Fisch very well may sustain. We just haven't seen him long enough at one stop to see him sustain. Arizona, he left after 3 years. He's now in his second season with the Washington Huskies, a historical program. And I think if he stays at Washington, I think he'll do big things there. He is a hell of a coach. But anyway, that's my only thoughts on that, Zach.
I also think you and I both agree, Keith, that we don't know that it's going to get to a number 2 option.
Yeah, I mean, okay, look, there's our next question. Odds right now, Lane to Florida. Look, I've heard people give pretty high percentages. I'm going to just keep it in that 55% yes right now. I'm hedging some. There's no doubt about it, because it's just one of these things where, we just don't, there's this level of uncertainty, right? We don't know. Nobody really knows except Lane Kiffin. Okay. But I know there seems to be a little bit more optimism on the Florida side, at least until yesterday, at least until Wednesday, when maybe some more started emerging in Oxford. But I'm going to say 55% Florida. What do you think, Zach?
I probably go in that same ballpark.
Okay.
Maybe I'd even push it up to 60. It's just what makes it unknown is the timing in Ole Miss's season. I think that if Ole Miss doesn't make a deep run in the playoffs, I don't really know that he has much consideration for staying. I think that if they get knocked out or don't make it, I think he'll come. I don't think that there'll be much for him to really think about or consider from that standpoint. Like, obviously there's going to be a ton of factors that go into this decision, but in terms of how well is my team playing, how good has my program become, how close am I to winning a college football championship, if his team makes a deep run in the playoff, he could get those answers and that could change it. But I do think that that's where he's at.
Okay. All right. I think that's it on the UF coaching search update. We want to do an ad read before we get into our final segment,
Yes,
Zach? You ready for that?
All
right.
Let's do that and head over and give a shout out to Modelo. College football season is Modelo season. If you're listening to this right now, it means that it's time for a reward. Reward your full-time fandom with an ice-cold Modelo. Modelo is the official beer sponsor of the college football playoff. Gator Nation, you deserve a Modelo. This Friday, this weekend, hopefully you're celebrating a Gator win, first road win of the season on Saturday, or if you need one to feel better and lick your wounds, that'll help you too. So make sure you get your hands on a Modelo.
Beer's great because you need it for every occasion.
Yeah.
I almost think they should have a special flavor for win, special flavor for loss. Maybe the loss may be the one with a little extra kick. You know what I mean? It's funny. It was funny talking to Nick Roush of KSR, again, our Kentucky site. The Kentucky fans, all those losses to Florida through the years. And I'll never forget, Zach, I was a student reporter and I had to, you remember what it's like? You're just what we call stringers. You're writing stories for $40 just to get your foot in the door. And I remember covering a high school game Friday night in Mayo, Kerwin Bell's old high school. And Reggie McGrew, who ended up being a Gator great, was on that field that night. And I drove straight through to Lexington for the Florida-Kentucky game in 1993, slept on the floor at the hotel for just a few hours in the afternoon of the great St. Pete Times, now Tampa Bay Times reporter John Romano. And guess what happened that night in Lexington? Doring's got a touchdown.
Wow.
Okay. And I was on the sideline because for those that don't know, at the end of games, Zach is usually on the sideline. I'm in the press box. He has to go down and get interviews.
Yeah.
He has to go down to the field level to get interviews. So usually writers are on the field the last 4, 5, 6 minutes of the game. So I was on the field for that last drive. Chris Doring, I'll never forget it. And I want to say a couple plays before, Danny Werfel had to throw one out of bounds. The ball either hit me or nearly hit my foot. I mean, it was that, they're just hustling down the field. They score. We go into the locker room. We do all our interviews. And I didn't, I'm just writing all down. I didn't have a good recorder. I was a poor student. I get back up to the press box, and Robbie Andrew, a great Gainesville Sun reporter, was up there, and I was going to help him get quotes. He goes, "What do you got?" And I looked at my notes and I said, "I can't read them." I was, in that moment, your brain is just frozen. What did I just see? And as a student reporter, you're kind of a homer, to be honest with you, because you go to that school. But just a great memory. But Zach, and I'm going on and on, but as I drove home the next day back to Florida, I listened to the Kentucky call-in show the next morning. It was the most, it must have been like the day after JFK got assassinated. I mean, it was the most depressing 90 minutes to 2 hours I've ever heard in my life. And that was before, by the way, Florida went on to win another 25 in a row or whatever it was over Kentucky. So we'll see. So we got to preview this game, Zach. That was a lot of buildup for not much. I've been doing that to you a lot there, Zach. Gators Wildcats preview and picks. What do you think, man? What's your gut telling you right now, Zach? I thought Florida looked decent last week.
Yeah, I think Florida wins this game. Look, they're due for a win. I know Kentucky got a win on the road last week, but this team, I think, really showed some things coming off of that bye week and that matchup against Georgia. I think that certainly the injuries are concerning, but we've got good news at Gators Online that we reported on Thursday with Vernell Brown III expected to play. So with him back in the starting lineup, Keith, I think Florida will have enough at receiver. Had he been out as well, I'd have some concerns. But I think, with him and J. Michael Sturdivant, TJ Abrams, who's been getting a lot more playing time recently, I think the Gators have enough with that starting lineup right there to be able to win this game. Certainly they can't afford to have many more injuries. But I just think that they're due for a win. Defense travels. They've kept them in every single game, and I expect them to do that again on Saturday. But I would really expect Florida to try to do some things to get a lead, like to kind of push the envelope a little bit and try to put up some points and avoid another close nail biter. Like this is, I know that the line is close, but I feel like this is a game that Florida could potentially win by 2 scores. But no matter what, they got to win. Like this is a game that they have to have if they're going to make a bowl.
Nick Roush of KSR thought it was a good matchup for Kentucky. I think it's a great matchup for Florida. The biggest break of all, though, is the fact that it is not going to be super cold at this game, probably 55 to 50 in that range. So it'll be a little nippy for the kids from Florida, but not what it could have been, where, again, they're expecting temperatures in the 20s 2 days later and snow flurries in Lexington. So a break for Florida, night game, be a little chilly, but not frigid, right? But, again, the matchup. And I think one of the things we saw last week is going to pay dividends. And I'll probably be dead wrong, but one of the things we saw last week that Florida do, which was run DJ Lagway, not just horizontally, which didn't work, but vertically, which did, because now that's something that benefited Florida in that game, but it's something that I think can benefit Florida this week because now Kentucky knows that this guy's running again. This guy's running again. He hadn't been running since last year. Even when he was hurt last year, he still ran. And so now they have to account for that both in the running game and in the passing game. I think that's going to make life a little bit easier for Jaden Baugh, quite frankly. I think that's going to mean that Florida's going to be able to take maybe more downfield shots. So I think that's the other benefit of that. And I look for Florida to play a very good game. And like you, I just feel like sometimes when you say they're due, that's kind of like where you're pulling something out of the sky. But they have been, for all the jokes made about Billy Napier saying they're close, they're close, they're close. Well, it just got tired. You just got tired of hearing it. But the fact is, it was pretty evident. The evidence was there last week that they do look like they were close, and Kentucky isn't the team that Georgia's. Now, they do play better at home. There's no question about that. Coulda, shoulda beat Texas at home. Just
not in SEC home games, apparently, according to
well, that's true. But they are a little bit more. The margins aren't nearly there. Stoops has won some games against Florida before, but it just feels like that Florida knows that they're right there, and they just the 5 or 6 plays that they didn't make last week and Georgia did make them, you almost feel like it's going to turn. It just feels, maybe we're going to be wrong, Zach, but it feels like we're right there, man. When I say we, I mean.
You want to know something nuts that I just realized, Keith?
Yeah.
If Florida wins its next 4 games, it could cause potential coaching changes at all 4 of those schools.
Well, you know what?
Nuts?
It's time for a little Florida spoiler action, right?
Like if they beat Kentucky, Stoops could be out. If they beat Kiffin, then Ole Miss is out of the playoff and he could come to Florida. If they beat Tennessee, maybe that makes people restless in Knoxville. That's probably the least likely of the 4. And certainly if Florida puts it on Florida State, they're going to be upset about Norvell. So
if Florida beats Ole Miss, I mean, Lane Kiffin's going to be hearing it from their fans up there. Like this fan base that loves them, they do, but they're going to be pretty upset about that. Yeah, it's interesting. And the other thing is, Zach. Oh, go ahead. What are you going to say?
Yeah, it is fascinating to see how that game could be received. If it is a loss.
Well, then you look in the SEC standings, like you think 10-2 SEC team obviously getting in, and I think they probably still would get in. But what if you're like 6th in the standings in the SEC? I mean, you know what I mean? Then there's other conferences out there too. There are teams in the Big Ten that if they win out could potentially make moves too. So we can't really predict the future. I've got Florida winning this game. I think they're going to be able to move the ball. I think they're going to be able to run the ball. I think that's going to open up some passing. I think this is a game where DJ Lagway is going to rush for 50 or more, and I think he's going to pass for 225 or more. And I like Zach. I like Florida to win in that range of 30-16. I think they're going to play a good game.
Yeah. You're kind of thinking what I'm thinking. I don't have a score in mind, but I do think that Florida can win by 2 scores. They've got the statistical advantage in 17 categories.
Wow,
17, and UK holds the advantage in 6. I mean, so and then some of the advantages that they have against Florida are not by much. So Florida, this is a game that they absolutely should win. They've not won a road game yet this year, so it's they've got to go out there and show that they can do it. But this is certainly a matchup and a team that they have more talent than and should be able to beat. And they just need to have a consistent, solid performance from their offense. If they do that and don't turn it over, I think they win this game.
I don't think Florida, if my memory's right, I don't think Florida scored 30 points in an SEC game since the last time they played Kentucky. So it just feels like the stars are aligning. And, it would be a good feel-good win for the team, for Billy Gonzalez, who I just can't say enough good things about how he has handled himself the last week and a half or last couple of weeks in Gainesville. Again, I told a story on another show yesterday. I met him at a game watching Dallas Wilson last year, and I had never met Billy Gonzalez before, Zach, so I didn't know him. I never covered him before. And said hi. He said hi. And then I remembered that his son had played at Western Carolina. And as a kid, all my summers were up in Silva, which is, 10 minutes away from Western Carolina. And I told him that it led to a 20-minute conversation, and just the most pleasant guy. You can tell he bleeds orange and blue. I mean, he's talking like a guy that played for Florida and went to Florida. You could tell
he's the new Dwayne Dixon.
Yeah. You can just tell that there's just something, this place in Gainesville means something to him. And, in this era of mercenary coaches and staffers just going all over the place, he keeps finding his way back to Gainesville. And quite frankly, Zach, and this is going to sound stupid, but kind of reminded me of my dad, who went to University of Florida in 1959, couldn't afford it, had to transfer to the University of Miami so he could live with his dad because he couldn't afford, they needed the money. In the 1970s, as a little kid, he moved us to Gainesville from Miami. we moved to Orlando. In the late 80s, we moved back to Gainesville 3 times. Billy Gonzalez 3 times. Something just pulls people back to Gainesville. And for Billy Gonzalez, it's the University of Florida, and I think he's got some real affection for that school. They pay him a pretty penny to work there, don't get me wrong, but it does mean something to him, and I think the players are going to go out there and play their tails off for him this week.
Absolutely. No, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. We will not be there, so we will come to you guys with a rapid reaction from the comfort of our own homes. But we'll be in Oxford the following week.
You were worried about that snow.
Well, and I got to see the Lane Kiffin Bowl. There ain't no way I'm missing that.
That's true. All right. I interrupted you, Zach. You were promoting the like and subscribe, I think.
Yeah, no, make sure you guys like and subscribe. Make sure you guys are subscribed to Gators Online as well. You can get in the door for just $1. We are covering this thing from all fronts. Basketball season has started as well, so I'm busy with that. Recruiting is going to pick up once the regular season is over. So no time better than now to be subscribed here.
All right, that'll do it for this edition of the Gators Online Show. We want to thank Nick Roush of KSR. Make sure you go check out his work, especially during basketball season. One of the cool things is, since Florida obviously is an elite basketball school, it's kind of neat to go see what the other big programs, what they're writing about those teams. I mean, that's what we all have done for football, Zach. So you start doing it for basketball. So they do a lot of great work up at KSR. For Zach Albaverdi, I am Keith Niebuhr. Everybody have a safe, fun weekend, and let's see what the Gators can do in Lexington. We'll do it again after the game and then again Monday. So take care, everybody. Thank you.